Aarti, and welcome to Epic Conversations. And really excited to converse with you about your journey.
Thank you, Jitin, and thank you for having me here. It's exciting to hear people in their, when I got to know about Epic journey, and it seemed like a really interesting conversation. So thanks.
And just to give you brief about this Epic Conversation, the whole idea is for us to basically share our raw insights of our respective journeys, and it specifically deals with reinvention. And this whole conversation actually equips the listeners to gain confidence and to know from our journeys that what they can expect and that what they cannot expect out of this entirety of it.
That gives a good context.
Yeah. And Aarti, looking at your profile, I think yours is a perfect case of reinvention, and especially not singular but multiple reinvention. I mean, you started in hospitality at the Oberoi Group and ended up co-founding a 2,000-person outsourcing company. At what point did you stop following a career and start building an identity of yourself?
I feel that a lot of it was very organically. I won't have to say that it was a specific moment that kind of created the change or shift in my life. I am brought up in the Indian Air Force kind of environment where we shifted houses every 2 years. Yeah. So that kind of makes you a little resilient, and also it's kind of very normalized to have change in your life. So it didn't so the concept of change was not alien to me. The other thing I think was, in fact, in my early days of corporate career, I always thought that I'm never going to work in a brand that nobody recognizes. Mm-hmm. My first very short tenure was with ITC, then I moved to the Oberoi Hotels. And when you used to call up some company, I was in sales, and you call up companies and they'll be like these names that, you don't even know how to pronounce that name. And I should always think, but that's the change, that shift that happens in your mind as a young professional joining careers. And I see that today as well. People want to go with a brand. And so later on in your life, you realize maybe what are the things that you value, and you may want to kind of go a different path. I feel the Oberoi really gave a great foundation. It's a company that, it's known world over, but it gives you in sales or even in I guess other areas, gives you the experience to kind of talk to very senior people very early in your life, right? So you're talking, the people who are going to stay in the Oberois are going to be CEOs and vice presidents of companies. So that exposure kind of makes a shift, so that happens very early. Secondly, I feel that you get a sense of kind of the class that you want in the kind of work that you do. And that kind of also stayed with me as I did my other jobs as well. And I kind of maybe used that as a pivot to judge some of my companies that I worked with, though I was very fortunate to work with some great brands. But I also ended up joining and working in that time unknown Indian startup business. I didn't even know that that's going to be a sought after line soon. I did my MBA, and I in fact applied for a job with Lufthansa. When I went and interviewed with them, they said, well, you really don't know German, but why don't you go and meet this gentleman? And he ran the loyalty program for Lufthansa. Mm-hmm. And I went and met the guy, and he happened to be the chief guest at our IMI, was where I graduated from. And they ran the loyalty program for Lufthansa and the Miles and More program. And he talked to me about the thing. It seemed very exciting, and it was a very small organization. Mm-hmm. So after this I had already worked for a few years, like the Oberois and all, and then I did my MBA, and then I joined this. And I think the freedom that it gave me in terms of, you run your own program, you run your own P&L, all of that stuff, which is very alien if you're in a large organization for a young person with 4 or 5 years of experience. That experience, I think, shifted something in me at that time, moving from jobs which were corporate jobs in many senses to a more organic startup world. And I didn't realize at that stage that that's what it was. But some of the identity shift I can trace back to those, and I'm going to date myself, but this was probably 96, 97, 98 era. I, in fact, left and joined Microsoft to run their customer service for India and India subcontinent. So there was Sri Lanka and Mauritius and all of that. Mm-hmm. But pretty early on, I realized that no, I like the energy and the freedom and the flexibility and the control that you had in the, I guess now what you call the startup world. That I mean, it was just smaller organizations.
I'm,
So that shift happened then. I feel so it wasn't a
I mean, you are the living case of choosing reinvention than reinvention happening to you, and how beautifully you just you just discussed that it was nothing that it came to you. You actually lived with it throughout your life, and I think that's the beauty of any journey.
I think so, and I think a lot of, I mean, at some stage, I guess the environment that you're in also helps. I feel India was going through a rapid change. If you go back to '93, was liberalization, and so a lot of new things were happening to India, and I think we all just got caught up in that stream as well. So that helped. Things were reinventing outside our space as well, and it kind of gives you the freedom to reinvent. And I do believe, and I met a lot of my colleagues who worked later on in life in America. Some of them had never even left their state. Forget about leaving America, right? And then they were traveling the first time to India. And then you realize that the exposure is so one-sided if you don't really get that early experience to travel or experience some amount of change.
One more thing that strikes the chord is that the amount of satisfaction you get after you reinvent, or maybe after you have reinvented on various occasions. So a lot of people actually fear reinvention, and to be honest, that was my story as well. But once you have done that part, you have reinvented, and you have done something very impactful for you, let's suppose, not let's say for thousands of people, but for you, then the same reinvention journey actually starts making sense to you.
I think you're really right. I feel that being fearful of change, I think, is very, very normal, but B, I think it's very important to overcome. And I would tell any young parents to make sure, even for their children, they should experience change. I think today I notice children have a very controlled life. They go to school, they come back. Even when they go for play, it's a very controlled environment because they're usually doing coaching. So they may go for football, but it's coaching. So you have a coach who's monitoring, right? So there isn't a free space that they can find themselves. And then even if you're changing your coach or changing a space or going to a new training class, the coach is kind of holding your finger, so to speak. It's very important to allow them to do their own stuff sometimes, and it builds skills and resilience. And I feel that fearfulness will reduce, but I also feel there's a lot of excitement in reinvention. So, I feel that part is often forgotten, and people talk about it being scary or change, but I feel there's a lot of excitement. You get to think about what you want to be, or what you want the next 5 years of your life to be. Let's not talk very philosophically what I want to be overall, but I think that helps you judge your next journey. And the other thing I would say is be open, because even when I started my own entrepreneur journey, what we may have decided to do then was very different than what we ended up doing when we built Matson Kumar. Because you got to follow the money in many ways. You got to follow the opportunities, not necessarily what you plan actually comes through. So that kind of stuff always happens. And in fact, if I may, Jitin, you've had a very interesting journey yourself. And when I was introduced to you and I read about you, and I wanted to understand, because you were you were in marketing and, working with big brands, and you chose to opt out as well. And what made you do that? Because I think that, marketing at a global company is a very exciting line. And I feel that you're a little younger, so that age, there was a lot of excitement happening in marketing and advertising and all of that space, and then you decided to move. And what made that journey for you?
So I think I've enjoyed thoroughly my corporate time, and I've been blessed, having worked with great organizations and good brands. But as you have said, this part of reinvention, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes, situations force you to do, or sometimes that's very philosophical, but I believe that, sometimes your inner voice is telling you something.
That's true.
And that inner voice was always speaking to me across these 14-15 years of my career, that I want to do something meaningful, I want to do something entrepreneurshiply,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and this change actually happened while studying marketing. So I wasn't really doing a job of marketing, but I was trying to decipher marketing, psychology behind marketing.
Mhm.
And and trust me, I have had some great mentors who have guided me, and I strongly believe in the in the role of having a good mentor.
Yes,
So
yes, I get it.
so what changed in me was that after 14, 15 years, I thought that okay, maybe this is the right time for me to actually try something which I've always wanted to do. And even the external situations made me do this reinvention. And these were more personal and professional situations both. And then when I hopped into this marketing, this reinvention journey, the very first question which I had to myself was, what next? Yeah.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people do not have purpose when they leave their jobs, or when they are trying to think about the version 2.2. And that was my case also. I wasn't aware about my why. So during this last 1.5 years, when I've been reinventing, and as you right beautifully said, reinvention is a continuous journey. It's not that it stops or it starts. So when I started my journey, I started with what I knew best of, advising brands, creating brand strategies, creating brands from scratch. I have created 3 brands altogether from scratch, advising them on these things. And during this process, I realized that the meaning of marketing is much more deeper than we actually use it for. For example, the same pillars which I use for Epic, that's my philosophy, these are the pillars which are largely used for marketing concepts, right? But
Okay.
marketing also touch base upon psychology, right?
Of course,
So
especially consumer psychology, right?
absolutely. So now when I talk about Epic, even though these pillars are existence, positioning, in identity, communication, and community, these are all marketing concepts to say so. But these are much more than marketing. It's a more versatile framework. So we'll talk about it during our conversations, and I'm sure that we have a lot of interesting stuff to discuss. So coming back at you, Aarti, Matson Kumar, right? That's what you built. Uh,
Yes.
it's scaled to 2,000 people and across 3 cities with zero external capital. So most founders chase funding as validation, and we are seeing a lot of such funding news. And I mean, I'm
Yes.
seeing how
Yes.
much funding is being
Yes.
glorified right now, right? But it was all bootstrap for you. So what did bootstrapping force you to get right about culture that funded companies consistently get wrong?
Oh, that's a very, very good question, actually. And uh, when when we have a partner who's the Matson, and I was the Kumar of the company, and he and I had worked, in fact, in 2 different companies on and off. So we kind of knew each other, and we decided to do this. Uh, I think we were both, first of all, I was in early, just turned 40. He was maybe 48, 49 at that time. I think when you're in that stage of your life, you're also very cautious about the risks you're taking a little bit. So the idea was, let's start something. We both knew we could fall back on corporate career eventually,
Mhm.
and see how it goes. So it started from the beginning of, let's start something and let's see how it goes. And in fact, in the first couple of years, we thought we'd just do consulting, because when you're running a BPO, and my previous job is in BPO, it's long hours, exhausting, all of those things that sometimes drive you crazy. But when you're doing consulting, you realize that you miss the energy of the change you bring in your own company. And so
Yeah.
we pivoted back to actually building from scratch. Um, the When you bootstrap something, I think 3 things happen. One is you have to be very clear about the risks you take, and um, when you're funded, you have a lot of money to play with, and sometimes it's also not your own money,
Yeah.
though the investors are really partnered with you. But I think when you can write the check yourself, there's something shifts inside you.
That's right.
And secondly, so the risks you take are very calculated and very sure about the direction you want to go. Secondly, you have to have a strong base
Mm.
that will help you compete with the other larger companies, right? So you don't have money to throw on fancy offices and create
Absolutely.
all of those fancy environments. I think from the early days, what we really did was, I think, build a sense of belonging, build a sense of trust and confidence in the team that you hired, right? So we hired somebody, and they were very young people. So some of the people who went on and worked with us all through the journey may have been the first or the second job. We very early found the aptitude and the energy of those people, and I think that helped us build the team, because we built it on the foundation of not just my partner and me, but on the foundation of a lot of the energy of the people that we hired early on. And there were some very smart people. I was fortunate that they stayed with us through the journey. And I do believe that when you build a sense which is based on confidence in that other individual who's going to drive the job for you, and you're not micromanaging, you build a sense of trust. Culture then actually is a joint thing. It wasn't built by me, right? It's built by the team together, and it has to flow down. In fact, I would spend less time in the office than those young people who were spending in the office, because I also said a young child, so I would go. Luckily, I was staying very close to the office. I would go in and out, but in those early days when people didn't mind staying many hours, I know it's changing now. You know how it was. People made office your home, and you build your friends there. You kind of, so there was a lot of energy in the office, but it was also good energy. And I feel in a funded company, you miss out on a lot of that, because you're very focused on the external show, which is you got to have a swanky office, you got to have the right things to attract people, rather than giving these core things, which is a sense of confidence in them, a trust in them, building a sense of belonging. And we built a lot of frameworks around that early on in the days. And I feel that, you could say that a lot of the new companies have that eye of the tiger kind of energy. I can kind of think of a more recent thing, and ours was a little bit more. I'm going to again go back to references. There's an artist called Tracy Chapman. She was very raw. She was very just guitar, acoustic kind of a person, so not a lot of that background noise. But slowly built and became a very popular artist in the 80s. And why? Because her voice is very honest.
Yeah.
And I think that came across in the kind of company that we built from scratch. And even when we grew to Jaipur, there was a whole committee that we decided whether Jaipur is the right place for us. And it worked really well for us. So, and then we went to Bangalore. Bangalore, of course, was it's a no-brainer. If you're in IT services, you've got to be in Bangalore. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what a lot of funded companies ignore was a point, or was the factor that you have actually, have entirely kept your strength around, and that's culture. A lot of people, who are employees who are sadly not in a great culture would actually want you to be their manager, because culture is something which doesn't speak itself till the time you feel it, right? It's no KPI that you can work upon. It's no external validation you can work upon. Yet a lot of companies fail to figure out what kind of culture they want to have.
I think because it's not something that I think especially funded companies think about very consciously. They think about brand, they think about marketing strategy, especially go-to-market, all of that. And a lot of investors are also looking at those kind of things when they look at their monthly or the quarterly review. What's your product, what's your go-to strategy, and what are you doing, which market are you entering? The culture, unfortunately, does become a little on the back burner, but I feel it's changing now. In the conversations we've been having, it is changing. People are realizing this, and I feel that more and more, especially this decade, I think COVID caused that conversation to come in forefront, because there was a lot of burnout, a lot of people feeling disconnected, disengaged. But even earlier, I feel that there was a huge need for this, but a lot of people connected a lot more because we were in the office all the time. There was a lot of concept in those days of management by walking around. While people sat in big offices. In fact, one of the things we had in our Matson Kumar, we had no no closed cabin for anybody, no matter who the person was. We all kind of sat together often in open workspaces to discuss things. That's why collaboration happened very well. I know that's easier when you have smaller organizations in one offices, but I feel like this is something which is very critical to who you want to be when you're building a company. And if you don't think about it, and one of the frameworks we have developed in my new company, Culture Lab 360, is taking your values and in fact making it measurable. So we are talking about KPIs to every value. So you want to be agile, then you got to measure how you're agile are you, and are you actually building an environment of agility? Or if you want to be a risk taker, then what do you do when you have a failure? Do you in some ways people say don't shoot the messenger, and we say don't shoot the messenger, no, hug the messenger. So if something went wrong, then if you build this culture of fear that I'm going to go and tell my boss that this project failed, you're not going to be a risk-taking company. So you got to look at how your values king, and we build the whole framework that allows you to drive KPIs. And I feel, even coming back to you, and I just wanted to understand the Epic little more, because you did talk about the clarity or the existence clarity that you had. And so when you did Epic, and how have you built Epic for yourself or for other individuals as brands for humans who are reinventing themselves?
Oh, that's a very wonderful question. Aarti, so my whole career transformation is a result of Epic. So I don't believe in reading, learning, and then teaching, right? I believe that first, what goes through me builds my experience, and basis my own validation, I then propose it to somebody else. And the very core, and that's exactly what you also said. Yeah, when you were talking about culture upon values, and then giving a KPI to the values.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and believe me, that burnout does not necessarily mean that you're working 24 hours a day. The burnout can also happen when you're working which you don't want to work, or or maybe
very true.
Something
very
around
true.
that, right?
Yes.
So what I realized during my time also was that so I always enjoyed marketing, yes. But was I enjoying the application of marketing was a question that I was asking to myself.
Okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately, or over the recent past, marketing has only been performative. Yeah. The real essence of marketing was always pull, if you remember our brand concepts.
Yes.
The real understanding of marketing was creating a meaning for the customer, right?
Yes.
For them
so
to come
there's
to
a
us.
pull factor. Yes.
Yeah. But now, how do a lot of founders evaluate marketing? Basis click-through rates, basis all performative these things. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's definitely not that. It's just that the technology evolves, and then you've got these things. But what I'm saying is, like, don't forget the foundations. Yeah.
Okay.
And that very core thought I applied to my career. So when I applied it to my career, I thought that, okay, I will help, or I will advise founders in their brand building or in their business strategies, because I'm a mixture of both business and brand. So I'll help them out, but I will not do it in a performative way. I will do it in a more foundational way. And believe you me, Epic is a wonderful tool for diagnostic first. There are only 5 reasons a brand can fail. Trust me, 1, they don't know their value yet. They don't know what they're bringing to the table. Second, even if they know that, they are not able to position themselves to the people.
Articulate it, yeah.
Articulation comes third. I mean, the way you are, for example, you know your specific sphere in the market, position in the market. Then are you able to build your identity? And over here, identity is not only logo. It is also the behavioral patterns the brand shows. And people observe behavior of brands. I mean, it's not that people only see the logo. They try to...
Of course not. Absolutely. It's the humans behind the brand.
Yes, and you are selling it to the human. Humans trying to sell to a human, and the only thing is brand in between, right? So that's how Epic evolved. And to my surprise, Epic was not only a marketing solution or a brand solution. It was your very own career solution. It was a very own leadership solution. Because in my own leadership experience also, I have personally faced a time wherein my values were separate from the decision I was asked to take.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's what creates a toxic culture. When a person who's having a different value is asked to create or to operate on a very different value, then I'm not saying that toxicity will increase, but the feeling of displeasure will increase, the burnout will
But
increase.
some of it in life is also like that, don't you feel? Sometimes we are, even in our work, in our personal life, we have to do something which we may not
Yeah,
believe in a lot because, we all live in a society or we live with
that's
expanded families that we may need to do
yes,
some things
yes,
that
yes.
yeah.
I think that's there, Arti. But so I'm not saying change your actions. That's the beauty of it. I'm not saying that you can't be person A versus person B versus person C. You can be all these three persons simultaneously. But and trust me, we underestimate our values, we underestimate our strength so much that we don't know what it can unfold. Right?
True.
So
That
so
I completely believe that people can do a lot more than they even when they put the
yes,
mind to, if they really
absolutely.
just, yes.
I mean, just to give you an example, continuing that, if he thought that only people like Steve Jobs can create innovation, then Satya Nadella is proving him wrong, proving this thought wrong. Yeah,
Yes.
and they both are different leaders altogether. But look at
Yes.
Apple where it is. So again,
Yes.
this whole concept is like what your Culture 360 also, the Culture Lab 360 also advocate on. It's on the existence first. Once you know your existence, it took me 1.5 years to reach here to Epic. Why? Because there was no structure to it. I was just randomly, trying things out, doing mind mapping, doing all these things. And then what I realized was reinvention was tough because people did not know what to do. It took me 1.5 years to figure out what to do. What if I got
Ah,
a structure to it? I wouldn't, matlab, anybody else who asks me, okay, I want to reinvent, I'll say it can happen in 3 months also, it can happen in 3 years
yeah.
also. You
True.
need to follow a structure.
So that's interesting. I mean, I've never heard of anybody take reinvention journey into a business model, which is very interesting. I feel that today, as you rightly said earlier, people are chasing large, the building a unicorn.
Mhm.
And I feel that tomorrow it is going to pivot back. In fact, a lot of my research since when we wanted to work with SMEs was that 90% of the companies in the world actually are SMEs.
Wow.
It's started changing a lot because they were getting purchased by large organizations.
Mhm.
But if you go back to 5 years ago, there was that's the about 60% of people work in SMEs, 90%
Wow.
of the companies, because obviously large brands have much larger volumes. So there's a huge space which is in the small and medium-sized organizations, which may not have the kind of access to funds
Yeah.
that larger companies do.
Yeah.
But larger companies also invest a lot in brand building, in employer branding, which the smaller companies don't. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I feel there's a benefit of doing all of that. Doing that, and if you don't have your house in order from a leadership perspective, from a culture perspective, then it's very difficult to compete in the world because you're not, neither are you investing in your public image, neither are you investing in your internal house, so to speak. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I
Which
think.
doesn't need a lot of money, it just needs clarity, frankly speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, for example, when we built Maths and Kumar, as I mentioned, there was a very different journey. Now in Culture Lab 360, I'm in a very different stage of my life now. So we're taking it slower, we're taking it more consciously, and there wasn't a clarity when I exited Maths. So we sold Maths and Kumar to a Canadian company, and there was a transition period for a year, and I was very clear that I wanted to exit after the deal. After the transition. So I had kind of given myself a year. It became maybe 18 months or something like that. And then it was a little bit of blue sky thinking. I traveled a lot, did all of those things that you want to do and you don't end up doing. I was in a stage of my life, there was empty nesters, both the kids were out of the house. So there was convenience to be able to do that, though we have a little dog, so I can't really leave the house that much here, so I have to come back for him. And also then I realized I had a lot of started meeting people. When you're working, especially in a completely bootstrapped organization, you don't end up having a lot of time to do a lot of networking outside your
Yeah.
space. Most of the networking was for companies working in my space or with our clients and their space. So this was the time when I started meeting people, and I realized a lot of things had changed. A lot of exciting things were happening, but also there was something that maybe I had not experienced before, because we were so blindly working with blinkers on in our work. There was just so much of disengagement in the world with the companies, right? People said, oh, you can't build friendships at work. And I said, well, I've had a lot of friendships built at my work. People talked about disengagement and talked about, feeling the burnout pressure and all of that stuff. And yes, a little of my 80s hat or 90s hat came in saying, oh, we all work long hours, so how does that make a difference if you have to work long hours? But I feel it's not about the hours, which is very truly, it's about what you're doing in the hours and how are you treated in the hours. And it's sad to say that majority of the people, no matter which level they were not happy in the existence of their work life, which was shocking to me, because I never had, thankfully, such a bad experience during my entire working career. I started with the Oberoi's, went into an Indian startup company, and then went into outsourcing space, went into Microsoft, then went back into startups. So I've had different bosses, different kind of environments, but luckily I've had the opportunity working with some great people, and one or two of them who were not so great, at least I learned what not to do and I become a leader. So, I feel that there was this, and that's what became the birth of Culture Lab 360. Then we started having this conversation of why is it everything so disconnected, and what can we do to help people realize that investing in your culture is so critical, not just to building your image internally, but from a brand perspective, but also from a mental health perspective, right? Not just yours. I mean, otherwise you'll be staying up all night as a founder, because your people will be leaving you, and you'll have a huge attrition problem. So it's going to even cause you business. So there's a huge amount of ROI that comes out of just having invested in great sound culture practices that follow through everywhere. You can't just have these say I'm going to do X and then not follow through. So that was the genesis of Culture Lab 360. Yeah.
You just said that, over a period of time after Max and Kumar, you realize that culture needs to be, something which needs to be inherited, or it needs to be focused on. Talking about that clarity, Aarti. So again, this is a little personal question and a very direct question. So, you exited Max Kumar after 13 years. And then almost immediately opened, started Cultural Lab 360. So was that kind of the speed of the change? Were that you got more clear during those 13 years, or was that you were trying something new and still unsure? I mean, why this question is because the rate of change, the rate of how you evolved from a different organization, where the core services were different, and then into Cultural Lab 360. And throughout the discussion, you have been talking about culture, of how you've made the culture of Max and Kumar. Is that the clarity kept on evolving, or it was just a new something that you want to try? What was it?
I feel it's a very thoughtful question. So when I left Max and Kumar, this was not a journey that I had planned for myself, which is starting Culture Lab 360. As I said, I went on traveling quite a bit, met a lot of people, thought of a lot of different ideas of businesses, but nothing really sounded right to me. And one of the things that has been very fundamental to how we built Max and Kumar, as I said, was culture. And not consciously in the beginning. In the beginning, it was just, you have a mom and pop shop, so to speak, hire the first few people, and then you kind of start building. And then you realize that culture is a huge differentiator, even when it comes to your clients. I remember the clients during COVID, and when we had to all go offline, remote, one of our, large client, and it's a very well-known name, said that one of the things that they will send them a feedback from how we were able to go remote and all, and they said your honesty, integrity in the way you kind of manage that, what will fall through the cracks, what will not, was one of the things that they found different from all the other partners that they were working with. So that I'm just saying that from a clarity perspective, that's always been one of the ways that I like to run my own office space and workplace, or your personal space as well. And that clarity was there. And secondly, I told you when I started Maths and Kumar, it was in the 40s. So when you're in your 50s, you're a very different mindset and mind space. You're not looking at uh, the craziness, because you don't want to do the craziness anymore. So it had to be far more thoughtful.
Mhm.
It wasn't about a race to success. It wasn't about a race to hit a certain revenue number. So now the pivot was a little bit more thoughtful about what matters to me, and I mentioned to you about the conversation I'm having with people, that why this seemed like this was something that was really broken. And I really believe that work can be very energizing. It can be very fulfilling. You can build, as I said, great relationships at work. So if you're not getting all of that, a lot of people end up marrying their colleagues at work. So you also find romance at work,
Yeah.
So there's work is not, it is a part of your life, but it's a very significant part of your life. And if you're living in a significant part of your life where you're not experiencing a space that values you as a human or a person that you can contribute, then I feel that there's something wrong with it. And the problem is, I feel that's not a small percentage today. That's become a much larger percentage than it was, let's say, 2015. 2015, people were excited about going to work. 2025, people are saying, I go to work because I have to go to work, but my life is really what I do outside work, which is great for you. But even what you're doing at work should be exciting enough. And there's a larger percentage who feel that disconnect. And that's caused me to think about building this from a mindset of operators, from a mindset of empowering our middle management, because I believe they have the biggest problem. You have to manage your bosses, and they have a value that the HR and the senior leadership have come up with. And we put a lot of, supposedly we give them a lot of power, but actually they're driving KPIs and they don't really have that flexibility, or people don't invest as much in them to be able to drive culture. So that was really the focus of Culture Lab 360, to empower our mid-management people, the people in their 30s and early 40s who may be managing large teams or global teams and have never had a global experience. And you're managing a team in Philippines and you don't know how they work or what their thought process is. So that's
I think that's also a program called Amplify, right? Built specifically
Yes.
for middle managers. And when I was just reading about it, I thought that why middle managers? I mean, if you look at it, we have always been told that the culture is more of a top to bottom approach. Like the senior leaders are responsible for culture, but your Amplify is talking specifically to middle managers, and I mean that's a deliberate yet contrarian choice. So what did you see breaking down inside Maths and Kumar that made you convinced the middle is where culture actually lives or dies?
And in fact, I'll flip it to say what didn't break, but what worked. As I said, we had very strong minds. Not everybody. I don't think that it's not that I had 100% success in our mid-management area, but we had very strong mid-managers, and a lot of them were because they took ownership and they believed in the brand that we were building. In fact, one of our young managers, when we were at a client site, and sometimes we used to hire people who used to sit at the client side. So we had a team that had just got hired, and we had gone there for a review, and he was meeting the team, and he said, so it was in Bangalore, so I'm coming from Mysore, I'm coming from, so people say, I'm so-and-so, I belong to X place or X, and they were all, people don't actually live in Bangalore, they're all coming from other cities. And this gentleman said, I'm XYZ, his name, and I think they used the word I hail from. So he said, I hail from Maths and Kumar. He said, I joined when I was a second job, and I've been here 12 years or 10 years or something like that. And this is my life, this is my identity. And
that's the beauty of it, actually.
Yeah. And I feel it's not something that we train people to do. It came from within, and I feel that that's the power of your mid-management. If you get that, they will drive it for you. For example, another interesting thing was when during COVID, when suddenly it was announced that we're going to have a lockdown. And I remember that I had gone to my mom's house, so I was a little further away. And there wasn't this directive that everybody come to work, yes, for the senior leaders, but before I knew it, by 12 o'clock, we had some 200 people coming on bikes to Delhi from their houses and paying guests in Delhi on bikes, because we didn't have laptops for people. We used to have those old desktop systems. They used to come, they came on their bikes to pick up their desktops and their CPUs and the keyboards and the whole contraption and take it to go so that they could start being productive from the next day. Equally, the person could have said that, hey, you didn't give me a system, I'm not going to work.
Yeah,
right?
actually.
But instead, that mid-management layer was able to get 200 people to come to the office in the middle of the night on a Sunday to pick up the systems so that they could be plugged in on Monday morning and start doing the work. It was very easy to say that I can't meet my targets because you didn't give me the system.
Yeah.
And I feel that's something that doesn't happen by me. It happens because of the culture that you create, which is far greater than one person. No one person can create that culture. It has to be a group of people.
Yes, I mean,
And I feel,
when I reflect back, a lot of so senior leaders, yes, there is. I mean, though you are discounting the role of senior leaders, but that was your maturity to basically, give
no, I'm
power
not
to
discounting. I'm not
middle
discounting.
managers.
Yes.
But on a different note, that you're right in saying that the way middle manager actually behaves. So this person is actually a bridge between the senior leadership and the people down with. And for a culture to thrive, this bridge should actually carry the weight of that culture. So I mean, wonderful put.
No, I completely, and just to be clear, I don't minimize the role, but I think the leaders set the pace and set the space. But if they don't empower the middle management, they don't trust the middle management, don't give them that connection over a period of time to believe that this brand is theirs, then that's where the disconnect happens. Very often the senior leaders builds that in their mind, but they haven't carried it through to their younger people.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I think it's very...
Yes, I think I've seen that in a lot of companies, that senior leaders and the gap between senior leaders and the further designations happen largely because they are afraid to lose control. They're afraid to maybe empower the middle managers, and that's where the entire understanding of culture is important.
In fact, I think just going back to you, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking. So you use the EPIC framework, you said, for brands as well as for professionals and individuals, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, and I think even in that journey, there would be some people who consciously go through reinvention and some people who just rush to it. How have you seen that evolve for people who consciously go through reinvention, or some people who just immediately pivot without really giving it a thought, and they reinvent maybe not by choice, or maybe circumstantial, requires them to reinvent? And how have you seen that change from let's say 6 months or 8 months or 1 year later? How have they matured in their reinvention?
A good question, actually. See, what I believe is, and that's entirely my belief, that reinvention is not a crisis, it's an inside-out strategy. Now, for professionals, reinvention can occur in one of the two ways. One way is definitely they are consciously choosing it, and second is definitely the environment asks them to reinvent. And today's environment, job loss and everything, it's a very disruptive environment altogether.
Yes.
But your question is around pace of reinvention, the speed of reinvention. Some people want immediate results. Some people want, they know that things take time. See, one analogy I want to give in that, Arti, is if you have spent 10 years, 15 years in a company, you have given 15 years, of your personal life to professional life, then why do you want to expect 15 days to work miracle for you? Yeah. And
talk like my gym instructor.
Yeah, I mean that's very that's a hard reality, which see, but the question is not why they're asking about speed. When I've talked to them, the question is why they want reinvention to happen suddenly. The why behind that. And I think the reason is that, they are afraid of uncertainty. With job,
Ah,
tomorrow you will go, well, even after a month you will get your salary, and then all of a sudden you are switched off from that constant source of salary and a predictable schedule. Then your mind runs in a very negative outlook. So what they really want to understand is the conformity. That okay, I'm starting my reinvention. And a lot of people who come to me in terms of this actually ask me that, can I get positive results from 1 month or 2 month or 3 month? See, the answer here is what positive according to you is it a constant cash supply, or is it that you are becoming more clearer in what you want to do next, or is it a direction that was missing throughout and you were uncomfortable with? And the
very
speed of
good.
it
Yeah.
depends upon how you take reinvention as. If you take reinvention as a crisis, your mind will always turn negative, right? Why it happened to me? Now I can't do anything,
Yeah.
right? And reinvention is only meant for people who have cash or who have savings.
Yeah.
All kind of negative things will come to you. But if you treat it as a strategy, and I'm a strategic person myself, so strategy needs careful planning and structure, right? And when you operate basis that structure, when you give your efforts, you tend to find a solution, you tend to arrive at a solution. But structure or strategy does not say that there should not be any execution. Your
Ah,
strategy is as good as you execute it, right?
yeah.
So my answer to all these individuals and professionals is always that, don't first of all treat it as a strategy that you are creating for once in life. You are creating a strategy for yourself for once in life.
Yes.
Till now, you got a job, and then you got a salary, then maybe society forced you to do a course, maybe society forced you to join a job, or maybe society is now forcing you to live a life that society has given you. So for once you have taken a stand to be what you wanted to be, and do what you want to do. So don't rush in that.
Do you find that, do you find what age group are you finding more people moving into this reinvention journey?
Yeah, so interestingly, more of middle level managers.
So not so
They
much the young people, for
see,
example.
fortunately or unfortunately, the generational gap between young and 40 plus is actually it's a Gen Z versus a millennial kind of a discussion,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of young people are more clear in what they want to do, right?
I
Because
think they're very clear on what they don't want to do, not
yeah,
necessarily what they want to do.
absolutely,
For
absolutely,
example, and then a lot of them don't want to, for example, they want to be more gig workers and they want to
yeah.
be able to have more control of their time. And in fact, I tell them sometimes that don't discount the uh, advantage of a corporate job. Yes, they'll always say, "Oh my God, it's soul sucking. This is the new way to just beat up all corporate jobs." And I say, first of all, there's discipline. I think early years of your life, you need that discipline. And yes,
Absolutely.
you may have a boss who's not so, maybe a little arrogant or whatever, but it gives you discipline, but it gives you a salary at the end of the day, which is also very important to build your next. You want
Yeah,
to build something for yourself. You need to have a 2 or 3 years of a stable money coming in every month so you can build yourself. So I do believe that that's what I was wondering. I see a lot more youngsters wanting to go independent. It's not easy getting a job. Just because
absolutely.
Claude tells you that you're great at something doesn't mean you'll get clients who are going to willing to pay that kind of a thing, right?
Absolutely.
So
No, I think, and let's take cloud for example. AI for example. I mean, the young generation have every tool to brainstorm their ideas. I mean, looking back at my career or your career, or people who have started their career 15, 20 years back, we had limited options. We had certain expectations that okay, you studied this much, you get into a job, you have a happy life, you marry, you have kids. I mean, a lot of
happy life के बाद you said you marry. So there's a happy life path and then there's a marriage and have kids path.
so I will not comment because my wife will also be watching this podcast.
So when you get to my stage in life, you don't care if your husband watches it.
Yeah.
You'll say, ठीक है, क्या करेगा?
I'm waiting for that stage. But yes, I think the current generation is more aware. they have more source of knowledge, they are more confident, and I
I
think,
feel,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt,
What?
but I have to disagree.
Yes,
I
yes.
feel that yes, you're right that they have a lot more tips. But for example, in our time, we had internet came in.
Yeah.
Probably in your time, it was already there. I was in an era where there was first Lotus 1, 2, 3, then became PowerPoint, where we used to draw up slides on a piece of paper. And one guy in the office used to have the PowerPoint and the Microsoft license, so to speak, Microsoft Office license. But I feel that today, in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said his wife works in a company where they do some research work, and they did this experiment where they gave this a research paper to. There are 3 groups of people. One person only got the research paper. The other group had no paper, but they had the topic and they had access to Claude or any LLM. And the third had ability to do both. And then they had to come back with maybe analysis of the paper and the next step forward. And he said the deepest understanding was from the group that had no access to any tool, so they had to read the paper thoroughly. Whereas the other person just used what Claude gave them as inputs. And the third group, since they had the ability of the tool, while they read a little bit of the paper, they didn't go deep. And I feel that depth, it's like the Google map, right? And people say nowadays kids are very independent, and Gen Zs are very independent, and they can go anywhere. And I said in our time we didn't have Google Maps, so you had to ask for directions. You had to say, "Bhaiya, यहाँ पे कैसे जाते हैं?" whatever. You didn't know which bus number, all of that stuff. You had to engage with people. You had to get out of your comfort zone. You got lost many times. You took the wrong this thing. All of that was, I think, skills that we learned that helped us navigate life, which is not a Google map, right? Life is not mapped out. And that may have helped us unknowingly.
Interestingly, what you are saying is actually, what I believe in, that AI is making us more human. And that's the beauty of being human, is that you can go into the depth of things. And I totally agree with you that the depth that comes to you when you experience a situation. Let's put it as experience, right?
Yes.
When you experience a situation, you learn out of it. That depth is something which no AI can replace. And again, I mean, that's a whole topic, very different from today's topic. But
Yes.
I think through this medium, yes, I think that's one more important lesson for Gen Zs or for new generation, trying their luck or trying their something.
Yeah.
Well, luck is important, surface level knowledge is good, but it will not make you reach where you want to reach unless you totally, get deep
Right.
down under it. And that's a
I
beautiful
think
connotation, I think.
Yes. I think to be successful, you need to have a
Have that
depth
depth.
knowledge in any one line.
Absolutely. And that I think that is in future, in the world of AI, will separate between a judgment, versus a surface level answer. And that's what because in my earlier podcast I've discussed a lot about AI with a lot of people. In fact, one gentleman,
Interesting. Yeah.
he was an AI builder, and he rightly said that at this age and time you have to get your hands dirty on knowing AI, but AI should not come at a cost of human judgment, human skills. And that's exactly what you also mentioned a few minutes back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so
you
true.
have to use AI as a tool, not as a replacement of your thinking or your depth.
I think that's a great message for, as you said, some of this conversation today is also what tips you can give to other people in a similar journey. And I think that's a great tip. I also feel that if I was to say something, I would say don't fear going out of your comfort zone, because that's only when you can. There used to be some analogy, only when you let go of the rope can you reach the next stage. And I think something like that is what, or as they say, डर के आगे जीत है. हर तक जीत नहीं हो सकती है, पर at least आपको वो step लेना पड़ता है.
लेना पड़ेगा.
But I feel that, and I'm not saying because I reinvented myself, I'm braver than the next person. A lot of it, I do really believe, came from the way I was brought up, where you just, when you live in a situation where every 2 years you're moving and everybody around you is also moving, that's the normal. It's normalized. You don't feel that you are out of a space because somebody else. I only realized that this was not normal when I moved to Delhi. And I was in my 10th grade or 10th grade. And I did in one school, then I joined my other school for 11th and 12th. And that's when I realized when I was in those schools that everybody there was, they're from like grade 2 and grade 1 and all, and we were very few sets of people. Though it was an Air Force school, that were moving every 2 years. Otherwise, everywhere else, everybody moved along with you. So I think it's about what you normalize in your life.
Yeah.
Do you normalize risk taking? Do you normalize reinventing yourself? If people around you also reinventing, you get into that. So it's about taking steps and realizing that you can normalize those trends as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aarti. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. And I have many questions, but unfortunately, because of time restraint, I'm not able to ask you.
No, I think we'll, since you're a Delhi-based guy, why don't we meet for coffee one day and then we can have a personal in-person conversation.
Well, yes, I mean, and
In
trust me,
Gurgaon, but you have to come to Gurgaon.
I am coming to you, no doubt. And in fact, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people who are hearing us have a lot, to learn from each other's journey. And one thing that stand out is the reinvention is exciting if you treat it as a strategy rather than fearing out of it. And your entire journey has been perfectly, describing about that. So thank you
I
so much,
completely
Aarti.
believe that.
Thank you so much, Aarti, for your time, and look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you, Jitin. I really enjoyed our conversation, and this is great. I mean, your whole framework has been very interesting to learn about.
Thank you. And by the way, for people, please do follow Culture Lab 360, and do be connected to Aarti Kumar. She's there on LinkedIn, and I think she's doing a fabulous job in trying to change the way the culture of an organization were previously built on. And I think for even the corporates, being funded or not, the very first important or the DNA of your company should actually be the culture that you are setting. So please do follow Culture Lab 360, and here is the girl Aarti, and she's there for you, in the case of any requirement that you have.
Thank you so much, Jitin. And yes, if there are any questions, I'm sure you can DM me on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to talk. But this is a really interesting conversation, and thank you for inviting me.